Has anyone figured out what the new map is? No? Then we still have a problem. This map already had several sneak peeks. You see what it's done to our members?
I can't take this anymore!
God, where
Dover.
It's Birmingham.
It's Dover.
Birmingham. It's Birmingham.
And worst of all, it could be anywhere in the UK. It could be Winchester. It could be Dover. It could even be...
Welcome back everybody to Covering Guts and Blackpowder lore. Today we're covering two maps, London and Westminster. As per usual, the information comes from the official Guts and Blackpowder wiki, the only reliable source for lore. Remember to join my Discord, link in the comments. It has finally happened. What I've speculated in past videos has at last occurred. The Blight has traveled overseas and reached the British Isles, leaving London completely in ruins, as seen in the library. The current reason as to why the Blight finds itself upon the British Isles is unknown. However, it could be because of supplies headed to England, or maybe returning soldiers that have been reinforcing the ordered quarantine, or maybe even the Roscoff survivors. That's the exact danger of the Blight. You cannot always be 100% certain everyone is infection-free. London and Westminster take place on September 10th to September 11th, 1815. Martial law has been declared. This means the military takes control of the city to prepare for the arrival of the Blight, but regardless, London is lost. Your character in-game knows this, and that is exactly why the players attempt to flee the city and reach Horse Guards. There's no heroic push or last stand against the Blight, it is a dash for survival. What your character probably doesn't know is that London isn't the only place in the UK where the Blight has ravaged. As seen in the newspaper, the entirety of England is So, if you'd ask me, more maps set in the UK are inevitable. In any case, your goal in London is to get out of the city. Obviously, you rush through the streets, alleys, buildings, and even Bubbles' old shop. The Blight, but also riots of angry civilians, have laid waste to the city. Soldiers put on guard, killed and hung up people they deemed traitors. Fellow soldiers that tried to save their own lives, for example. The sharpshooters see you and the randomized Scottish NPC as traitors and will open fire on you. After you reach the end of the map, you'll encounter another NPC. A wounded sapper simply named Engineer. He tells us he was ordered by none other than King George himself to set fire to the city, in order to deal with the undead, of course. This tells us that King George lived to see the zombie plague take over his capital, and is probably taken somewhere else, much like the Prussian royal family. Before the sapper dies, he tells us to save what remains of Westminster, and we are left with finishing what he and his platoon started. Once we continue further, we can see giant vats of soda that we must destroy to flood and destroy a large chunk of London. And we are successful in this, because once Westminster is loaded, you can look behind you, revealing the complete destruction. In Westminster, we continue towards Horse Guards. We believe safety to be there. As we pass through the ruined streets of Westminster, we encounter a museum with a painting featuring Copenhagen, several items on display, and a zombie knight which carries the key to the exit. We then reach a barricaded position with a watchtower. We ask the tower guy, to open the gate so we can reach Horse Guards. As the gate is opened, several poor soldiers are mauled in front of us. Eventually, we do reach Horse Guards, and who do we find there? Mr. Wellington himself. He calls us scum, and tells us in order to prevent the Blight from reaching further, soldiers will blow up the Westminster Bridge at 12 o'clock midnight, ruining our chances at escape. Wellington tells us to save ourselves and make for that bridge, but not before handing us the King's colours. He himself stays behind, stating,
They couldn't forgive me for Belgium. They won't forgive me for London.
But more on that later. And canonically, Wellington dies here. He gets overrun by the Horde and gets eaten alive. We then enter carriages and hell ensues. It's a long journey to Westminster Bridge, and the fact that time can't be wasted really adds to the tension. After an igniter manning a cannon shoots our horses, we have no choice but to make it for the end of the bridge on foot. Clock strikes 12, and the bridge blows up, just as we make it to the other side, cheered on by several soldiers. As per usual, the map has several notes and newspapers. I won't be reading them all word for word, as I want to encourage you to do that yourself by visiting the wiki. However, I will be mentioning some things of note each of these papers describe. The Sandpiper and Crown Dispatch, the newspapers found on both maps, reveal some interesting things. In the Crown Dispatch, it mentions the following. Sweden is heavily fighting against the Blight, probably the reason they've been silent to their allies. The city of Malmö finds itself besieged by the Blight, being only 20 miles from Copenhagen, which was destroyed earlier. The newspaper calls men to arms to liberate Europe from the Blight, and mentions how Sweden, being removed from the European mainland, still finds itself invaded by the Blight, and the writer wonders if the British Isles are next. It also mentions one of my favorite articles by far. Wellington himself addresses the 1815 Waterloo campaign. A large force of British, French, and Prussian soldiers were to advance against the Blight at the farmsteads at Waterloo, like Hougoumont and La Haye Sainte. This offensive failed mostly because of the British that retreated. Wellington explains that generals deserted their posts, taking their soldiers with them. This is referenced in Wellington's dialogue too. They didn't forgive me for Belgium, they won't forgive me for London. Is this an easy way for Wellington to shift the blame? Or is he speaking truthfully? Furthermore, there's an article about a famine throughout the British Isles. And then, and this is unbelievable, there is an article about a possible cure to the Blight found in the French city of Nantes that I've been to in real life. A certain doctor named Edward Jenner mentions while looking grim, he is working on a cure. The last two articles of the Crown Dispatch mentions a steamship from the US being sent to Britain as a gift of peace between nations. And then it mentions the retaking of Paris from the Blight? This is all huge news lore-wise, and that's not even all. In the Sandpiper Dispatch, the following stuff I found worth mentioning. On September 1st, as I've said, the military is in charge in London prior to the outbreak. Aside from their presence, they fortify positions, defend existing ones, deal with troublemakers seeking to exploit from the chaos, and open fire on rioting crowds. On September 2nd, thousands flee London as the city becomes a bastion and nothing like what it once was. But the thought of a zombie plague that turns you and your loved ones into man-eating freaks reaching your city could also, be a reason to flee somewhere else. Riots have also increased, as well as criminal activity. The stock has crashed as well, and then the newspaper says some really interesting stuff. On August 9th, 1815, the Pope himself announced to the rest of the world Rome and the Vatican are holding out against the Blight. Amen, brother. I hope, I pray, I beg this means we can get a map out in Rome soon. Aside from this, there's nothing noteworthy, aside from Wellington mentioning how London itself has emptied its graves to make sure there's no zombies, but that the greatest threat comes from unprepared neighbors. So it's like you are in a group project with a few of your friends at school. You are doing good at preparing, your friends are not. You present your product and the teacher is not happy. Your friends dragged you down. You can't finish school properly because of this. You can't get a job anywhere. So you end up becoming a Guts and Blackpowder YouTuber instead. Hey, wait a minute. Then there's a guide to the Blight, which is a first. Britain is definitely well prepared. The first part of the guide describes the state of someone who is recently infected. It describes plague-like symptoms, much like the drawing in Tyrolean Village. The second part describes how someone who has died to the Blight will reanimate with strength to surpass that of sailors. So yeah, that explains how corpses can pin down full-grown men. Furthermore, there's a necrotic plague book, as well as a repossessed warning. But there's also a note of rebellion, and I love whoever wrote this in-game. It's a call to rebel against soldiers, saying how their presence is ruining civilians' way of life. They're literally trying to help you out, knucklehead. There's a quarantine warning, further showcasing how well prepared London was, and there's a note from Bubbles' friends from Horse Guards. I wonder who it could be. He begs Bubbles not to leave London, and mentions how Bubbles lost all his goods, and how folks are willing to pay double, even triple for Bubbles' items. And in return, Bubbles himself also left a note, meant for Wellington, his quote-unquote friend at Horse Guards. He talks about an expedition by his hand north of Brittany. His men were nearly sunk and were boarded to be put in cells. every supply was seized by the Royal Navy. Bubbles then writes he will make for Boston, America, but will leave Wellington firearms for his use. This pretty much confirms Wellington and Bubbles are good pals. Again, if you want to read all this in detail, visit the wiki linked in the comments. As you can tell, these maps are filled to the brim with lore. The Blight finally went overseas, something thought to be impossible. The future of Guts and Blackpowder looks very promising, and you best believe I'll stick around to cover every single map they release. Thanks for watching, and until next time.